applies for you. And we will begin this morning, as usual, with the prayers for going for refuge and rousing bodhicitta. So please recite these prayers, keeping the sense and the sound together, always remembering the meaning as you recite the words. O sangye chedan soge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dage chenyen gibe sanam gi dola penjer sanje dobar sho Sanje chedan tsoge chonam la chancho bardo dani chapsum che dagi chenyen gibe sunam yi drola penjer sanje robar shop Sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chenyen gibe sunam yi dola penjer sanje robar sho until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. I'm going back. Need to go back. Senjen Tamje Dewa Tan Dewe Chudan Dembrar Juju Dong Dong Ji Chudan Rawa Joji Donga Mebe Dewa Tamba Tam Min Rawa Joji Yerin Shadan Nitan Rawa Tanyon Shambola Nebra Juorji. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred for those near or far. So now please think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do this, we need to listen to, contemplate, and meditate upon the Dharma. So think to yourself that this is the reason why we are listening to the Dharma this morning. And the Dharma we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the 9th Karmapa, Wangchuk Dorje, in his commentary, Youthful Play. And we're discussing the 6th chapter. In the 6th chapter, the teachings, the 6th area, I should say, actually, the 6th area, the teachings on the paths in individuals has 3 main parts: the explanation of the paths, the explanation of the individuals, and a specific explanation of the paths. And so today we are talking about the explanations of the paths, and, which has the explanations of the, here it is, yes, the link between the chapters, the essence of the paths, the focus of the paths, and how the paths arise. In terms of how the paths arise, they're basically the methods on preparation, the meditations on the meditations on repulsiveness and shamatha, and then there is the section on the paths of liberation, or excuse me, the precursors to liberation, the path of accumulation, the path of joining, also known as the four precursors to clear realization. And now we have today we have come to the section on the path that directly realizes the truths. This is on the top of page 452 of the book. And so yesterday, or the day before, we had kind of a general discussion of the paths that lead to realization. And so we went through the 16 moments of clear realization in a general way. We talked about that. For each of the different types of, for each of the different truths, there are 4 stages. So to go through those 4 stages, I'm just going to go through it quickly to refresh you once more. Then when we go through the text, it'll be easier to see. So those 4 stages for each of the paths are, so for the path of, for the truth of suffering in the first column, there is first the Dharma forbearance of desire, which means that you see the truth of suffering in desire and you can bear it. You can forbear it, so it is called forbearance. You're no longer afraid of it even on the slightest level. And so that is the first stage, the first moment, and this is a moment of the path of no obstacles, which means that nothing can stop it. Nothing can get in its way of realization. The second moment is the Dharma knowing of desire, and that is when you've seen it in the first moment. The second moment, you recognize it. It's, like when you see a person, first you see the person, and then you recognize them and say, oh, that's Tashi, or whoever it is, right? So those are the first 2 moments. Then you've got the third moment is the subsequent forbearance of suffering. And subsequent means after, but it also means that kind of based upon seeing it in desire, you then realize that it's the same in the higher 2 realms of form and formless. That's the path of no obstacle. So that is subsequent forbearance of suffering, and that is, again, a path of no obstacles, a type of wisdom that actually abandons the antidote, that arises and abandons the antidote. And then that leads to a moment where you know the antidote, or you know the truth in the higher 2 realms. And that is a moment of liberation. So those are the first 4 moments, right? Dharma forbearance, Dharma knowing, subsequent forbearance, subsequent knowing. And then you have the same for origin, the same for cessation, and the same for path. So you've got these 16 moments, kind of going back and forth between forbearance and knowing, forbearance and knowing. So that is the kind of general presentation of that. So we went through that in detail, or a little bit more detail, the other day, and that's just a refresher. So now we can actually discuss the text. And I think that now that you have seen it a few times in that little chart, which is what we Westerners are used to. Then when you see it in the text, which is what people are traditionally used to, then it'll make more sense to you. So here we have the text for today, and this is again the top of page 452. So we're beginning here with the path that directly realizes the truths. So this has 4 topics: how the 16 moments of cognition arise. So this is basically what I just described. Teaching the 3 types of clear realization, which goes into a little bit of detail on what they all are. Then which levels support it. That means which types of meditation do you have to be doing in order to be able to do them. And then classifying the cognitions as 16. So how the 16 moments of cognition arise. So from the supreme of worldly dharmas comes undefiled dharma forbearance of suffering of desire. So just before this, you're on the last moment of the path of joining, which is called the supreme worldly dharmas. That's still a defiled moment. And then you have the first undefiled moment, which is the dharma forbearance of the suffering of desire. In other words, when you first see the suffering of desire, right? That's that first moment we were talking about in the chart. And then out of that dharma forbearance of suffering and desire comes the dharma knowing of just that itself, the suffering and desire. So that is the second moment, that is dharma knowing. So the first you have dharma forbearance of desire, of suffering and desire, and then dharma knowing of suffering and desire. And then likewise, for the rest of suffering, that means the suffering in the two higher realms, there arises a subsequent forbearance and knowing. So that is in the two higher realms. So those are the 4 moments in the for the path, for the truth of suffering, right? So those 4 moments. And then the text continues, 3 other truths are like that too. So it works the same way for origin, cessation, and path. So you've got 4 moments for each. Dharma knowing of suffering, Dharma forbearance of suffering, Dharma knowing of suffering. That's desire. Subsequent knowing of suffering, subsequent forbearance of suffering, subsequent knowing of suffering. That is the seeing the truth of suffering in the higher realms, and the same for origin, cessation, and path. So all 4 of these going one after another. So thus the clear realization of the truths is 16 minds. And so in this way, there are 16 moments that follow one after another that over the course of those 16 moments, you completely realize the 4 noble truths in all of the realms. So when you have completely realized the 4 noble truths in all realms, that's the 16 moments of clear realization. So, to read the text, from the supreme of worldly dharmas, the undefiled dharma forbearance immediately arise. So you have the supreme worldly dharma, the last moment of the path of joining, and then you see suffering in the desire realm. That's dharma forbearance of suffering in desire. That, as it says here, that focuses on suffering of desire. In other words, focus here means you're observing, or that's what you're thinking about. That's where you're looking at. It's like, it's kind of like if you have of course, all of our cameras have autofocus today, so you don't have to worry about it. But in the old days, or if you buy an expensive camera, you actually have to crank the knob on the lens to get it in focus, right? So that's what we're talking about. It's focusing on that suffering of desire. It's looking at the suffering of desire. It is forbearance for the sake of knowing dukkha meaning suffering. It's forbearance in the sense that you can actually put up with it. You are no longer afraid of it. You're seeing it. You're no longer afraid of it. So that's why it's called forbearance. So it is called exactly that. Forbearance, the dharma forbearance of knowing suffering, the dharma forbearance of suffering. It's like saying flowering tree or fruit tree. In other words, it is forbearance. You're able to be patient for the sake of knowing suffering. Just as when you plant a crabapple tree, you're planting the tree for the sake of its flowers, so you call it a flowering tree. Or if you plant, what do we say? A tree of gala apples or whatever apples you like. You're planting that for the sake of the fruit, so you call it a fruit tree. Similar here, we call it the forbearance of the dharma forbearance of dukkha. So here, when you see the word dharma forbearance or dharma knowing, you should immediately think, okay, looking at desire. That's what you should think. Dharma forbearance, and dharma knowing, that means looking at desire. Immediately after or from that forbearance, there arises the dharma knowing of just that itself, the suffering of desire. That's the second one. You know it. So this is given the designation dharma knowing of suffering in the treatise. This is what it's called in the treatise, here meaning the Jnanaprasthana, the text by, I think, Shariputra, one of the 7 arhats. So, and this is in all respects an undefiled moment, so it is called undefiled dharma knowing. So there's nothing defiled about it. The afflictions, those afflictions are gone. The wisdom is pure. It's an undefiled dharma knowing. So then, just as the forbearance of dharma knowing of suffering and the dharma knowing and the dharma knowing itself. So just as dharma forbearance and dharma knowing arise, likewise the forbearance of subsequent knowing for the rest of suffering, that is the suffering of form and formless, arises immediately following the dharma knowing of suffering. Because you know it in desire, and then you see it's the same in the high realms. So that's the dharma forbearance, or the subsequent forbearance of suffering. It focuses on general characteristics. In other words, you're not looking at this when you have the dharma knowing of desire, you are actually looking at things that are suffering and seeing them as suffering. When you are doing it for the higher realms, you are in the desire realm. Your focus, or you're not necessarily, you are in your body's in the desire realm, your mind is on the level of jhana, but you're focusing on the desire realm. But when you think about the higher levels, you are actually seeing them in a general way instead of looking at them specifically at the particular things. So it focuses on the general characteristics and is called the subsequent forbearance, or the forbearance of subsequent knowing of suffering. So usually in the text, it's called the shorter form, the subsequent forbearance of suffering. Then the so-called subsequent knowing of suffering arises. Once you have that forbearance, which is the antidote that eliminates the discards of seeing of suffering in the higher realms, then you have the knowing. Knowing here means like recognizing. So just as the four forbearances and knowings of the truth of suffering arise, then the four forbearances and knowings of each of the other three truths of origin, cessation, and the path are like that too. They happen in exactly the same way. So, as we have been through. So thus, in this way, through this progression, the clear realization of truths is 16 moments of mind. Now, the auto commentary doesn't make it clear how long these moments are. But the Abhidharma suggests that they're the length, because when you talk about moments, there are two types of moments we talk about. There is the infinitesimal partless moment or indivisible moment, the shortest possible moment, just like the shortest possible unit of time. And then you also have what we call the moment it takes to complete an action, or the moment of an action, which means the amount of time that it takes to do something. And that is kind of a variable length. And it can go actually, in some of the Mahayana texts, they talk about these moments as lasting anywhere between an infinitesimal moment and an eon. But here we're talking, but according to the Abhidharma, it says that this is the amount of time that it just takes to know. So it's very quick. And generally it's taught in the sutras that this goes very, very quickly. There's just one right after another for 16 moments. So these are the 16 moments of clear realization, and they are in three types. So this teaches, the next section teaches teaching the three types of clear realization. As it says here, there are three types of clear realization. Directly realizing the truth with undefiled full knowing, or undefiled prajna. So you have that prajna that sees the nature, is called the clear realization of seeing. So then the feelings and so forth that are concurrent with that full knowing are prajna, and also the prajna itself that focus on the truth. So they're called the clear realization of focusing. This means they're actually looking directly at it. They're focusing on it, they're looking directly at it. So you've got, at the moment that you have that prajna of the Dharma knowing of forbearance, looking at looking at the suffering of desire, at that moment you're seeing that. So that is the clear realization of seeing. And that Dharma and that prajna and the other mental factors, such as your mental engagement and so forth, are all concurrent with that, are also focusing on that. So they are called the clear realization of focusing. Then the clear realization of the action is knowing, discarding, making manifest, and meditating during the path. So what we're talking about here are these four different actions that happen during these 16 moments. And these are taught in the very first sutra that the Buddha taught. So what is it that we need to, the Buddha taught there are four noble truths. So what do we need to do with the four noble truths? We need to know the truth of suffering. With the truth of origin, what do we need to do to it? We need to discard it. With the truth of cessation, what we need to do is we need to manifest it, make it manifest. And then the path, what do we need to do for the path? We need to meditate on or cultivate the path. So those are the four actions: knowing the truth of suffering, discarding the truth of the origin, making the path of the truth of cessation manifest, and meditating during the path. These are the four actions. So these are four actions that happen during the 16 moments. So they are called these actions. So this action is the five aggregates of a single assembly. That is one person who is looking at it. So the discipline that is not concurrent with the prajna, That means arising and so forth, attainment and so forth, and that which is concurrent with the prajna or full knowing. So the discipline that is not concurrent with the prajna, this means like you're on a level of dhyana, so you have the restraints or vows of dhyana. You also may have the restraints of, or the vows of either a monastic vow or lay vow. So that's the discipline. And the arising and so forth, these are the characteristics of all composite phenomena: arising, staying, and perishing. And then the attainment of those paths, and that which is concurrent with the full knowing, that means all the other mental factors that are happening at the same time as your prajna. And this is because these all come together to perform the actions. They're all working together to do the actions. So thus they're said to be these three types of clear realization of the truth: the clear realization of seeing, the clear realization of focusing, and the clear realization of acting. So those are the three. And the action is an important one because it's really it's what the Buddha taught. It's what we need to do during these 16 moments. We need to know suffering, abandon the origin, manifest the cessation, and meditate on the path. Okay, so those are the 16 moments. So the question is, well, what kind of meditation do I have to do in order to meditate on, to go through these six types of clear realization? Can I just do it doing my regular shamatha meditation, or what? The answer is you have to be on the same levels as Supreme. So which level support it? It says on the same level as Supreme. So you're on the same level as you were on when you were meditating on the Supreme Worldly Dharma. And that has to be one of 6 different levels. So it has to be on the same of those 6 levels. So the commentary reads, the 16 cognitions of clear realization explained above are on the same level as Supreme Dharma. These are the 6 levels as explained earlier. So these 6 levels are what? Well, they're the preparations for the first dhyana, the special dhyana, the second dhyana, the third dhyana, and the fourth dhyana. So that's a total of 6 levels of meditation. So it's generally on one of those. It has to be one of the desire realm is just not stable enough for this type of meditation. If you're on the formless realm, you're unable to focus on the desire realm. So it needs to be on one of these levels of dhyana or the preparations for the dhyana. Okay. So now we have to classify these different types of cognitions. Well, what are they? What kind of, what can we classify them in terms of path? Can we classify them in terms of the paths of no obstacles and liberation? How do we classify that? So classifying the cognitions as 16 has 2 points. So the first is classifying them as the paths of no obstacles and the paths of liberation. So respectively, forbearance and knowing are the paths of no obstacles and liberation. So when you see forbearance, Dharma forbearance, that is a path of no obstacles. The path of no obstacles means this is kind of a short-term path, right? We're not talking about, we've got the 5 main paths of accumulation, joining, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. But when you are going through eliminating each individual set of obstacles, then you have 4 paths: the joining, no obstacles, liberation, and distancing, or distinctive. So here, the paths of the Dharma forbearance and subsequent forbearance are both paths of no obstacles. Dharma knowing and subsequent knowing are moments of liberation. So path of no obstacles means the moment that the wisdom first arises, and at that point the affliction can no longer stay. It goes away, and so that next moment is the moment of liberation. So that's why that's the path of liberation. So to read the commentary. Respectively, the 8 forbearance and the 8 knowings are presented in this order: the paths of no obstacles that discard the 4 classes of discards of desire, and the 4 classes of discards contained in the higher realms, and the paths of liberation, for a total of 16. So the Dharma forbearance of suffering is discarding the discards of suffering. The Dharma forbearance of origin is discarding the discards of origin in the realm of desire. The Dharma forbearance of knowing cessation is discarding the discards of cessation in the realm of desire, and that similarly with the Dharma forbearance of path. Subsequent is the 4 classes of discards in the higher realms. So those are those are discarded by each of the by the subsequent forbearances of suffering, origin, cessation, and path in order. Now, after each of those moments of no obstacles, they're followed by a moment where you recognize what you've seen. That's the Dharma knowing in the desire realm, the subsequent knowing in the higher realms. And so therefore, there are 4 of each of those, or another 8, so a total of 16. Okay, so that's 16 moments of clear realization. And then we have the explanation of the term, the path of seeing. From seeing the unseen, 15 moments of these are the path of seeing. So of these 16 moments, during the first 15 moments, you haven't quite seen everything yet. You're going through the process of seeing everything up to the 15th moment. So when you're seeing the truth of suffering, you're going through each of those 4 moments of seeing the truth of suffering. You're seeing the truth of suffering, but you haven't yet seen origin, cessation, path, and so forth, up until you get to path. But when you get to the moment of subsequent forbearance of the path, at that point, you're seeing the last of the truths. So you're seeing the unseen for these first 15 moments. And then that 16th moment would be a path of meditation only. So to read the commentary, these 16 cognitions are not all the path of seeing. From seeing what had been the unseen, or what you had not yet seen, 15 moments of these 16 cognitions, from forbearance of Dharma knowing of suffering to forbearance of a subsequent knowing of path, are the path of seeing. The 16th moment of cognition is the path of meditation only. This is because there is no previously unseen truth to see. You have seen everything. Instead, it begins the work of familiarizing yourself or cultivating. You've seen the truth. You've abandoned quite a few discards, but you've still got further to go. So you need to continually cultivating it. And what are you cultivating? What you've already seen. So it's the path of meditation. For example, if we go back to this, we've got the moments of Dharma forbearance. So all the ones that are kind of gray, the first 15 moments, those are the path of seeing. The 16, which is kind of, I don't know, dark tan or something, that is the first moment of the path of seeing. So the first 15 are your moments of path of seeing, and the last one is the first moment of the path of seeing. So that is the well, what do we say? Those are the 16 moments of the path of seeing. Now, at this point, there was a question that came in by email this morning, and I thought this would actually be a good spot to speak about it, because I think there are some questions that come about, particularly. I mean, the main question is, what does this have to do with me and my practice? That's kind of the essence of the question. What are we doing this? Why are we studying this? Well, these stages of the path that we're talking about are the stages of the path as taught in the sutras. And so when we speak about it in terms of the Mahayana, and in particular, we're talking about them as described in the Foundation Vehicle Sutras. There are similar explanations in the sutras of the Mahayana as well. So for the you also have the Mahayana sutras talking about the 5 paths: the path of seeing, the path of joining, path of seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So most of you are already familiar with those. When we get to things like the path of joining, there are also discussions of these 4 stages, the 4 precursors to clear realization, in the Mahayana scriptures as well. And there are even also descriptions of the 16 moments of clear realization in the Mahayana scriptures, but it gets more complicated there. Those are what you study when you study like the text, the ornament of clear realization. That's one of the big things that happens there. And what is the nature of the path of seeing and so forth. Now, in the Tibetan tradition, when we're actually practicing, we're following the instructions. Usually, most of us we're following the instructions, or many of us are following the instructions of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, and we're doing creation stage or completion stage meditations, and they don't completely map on, not completely. But the important thing to understand is, to the sort of general thing here, is that we've got kind of 5 different stages. The first is where you are kind of getting interested and you want to be ready, but you're not quite ready to actually meditate. That's the path of accumulation, and it's called accumulation because you need to accumulate merit, right? You gather merit, accumulate merit, and accumulating a little bit of wisdom, but not a whole lot yet. You haven't quite got to wisdom yet. So that's the path of accumulation. You need to accumulate those. And then there is the path of joining. And this is where you're actually able to meditate, not directly yet, but on a kind of more general level. Now, this is a point where you haven't quite got the, what do we say? You haven't quite got the realization. You haven't got direct realization. So your meditation is conceptual, but you have glimpses. So this is at the point where you're starting to have glimpses and things that you feel like are, maybe this is realization. You're probably actually, at first, if you have doubt about it, if it's temporary and you have doubt about it, if it's a glimpse, you're probably getting glimpses. This would be similar to the path of joining, the path of training. It's not, you haven't actually really seen it. You haven't had that really full-blown seeing. And this is something that comes up in Mahamudra instructions. For example, when Gyaltsen Rinpoche taught the third Karmapas aspiration of Mahamudra in Bodh Gaya a few years ago, he spoke about how first you have conceptual meditation, and you might have some experiences where you feel like you're seeing it. You haven't quite yet, and you need to follow the instructions of your gurus and so forth until you actually do see it. And the moment of seeing is when you actually have just like complete, what do we say? You have no doubt at all. You just know. If you have a moment, you think, this is probably it. It's not quite yet. If you have a moment, you say, this is definitely it. And that sense that is definitely it lasts longer than just a couple of days. That's probably the path of seeing. That's that takes a lot of effort to get to that point, and a lot of instruction. So that's kind of how it applies in our current practice in the Tibetan tradition. Now, if you're following the sutra tradition, like there may be listeners here who are practitioners of the Theravada Dharma, I think it is more similar in the Theravada tradition to what is being described here, although the terms might be a little bit different because the different Abhidharma traditions kind of branched off from each other. And then historically didn't have a lot of connection after the Theravada tradition spread into Sri Lanka. There was not as much connection, especially later. Kashmir, where the Great Exposition flourished, and Sri Lanka are far away. Just geography, not good or bad. It's just a question of geography, and the focuses and meditations were a little bit different. So at any rate, this is basically saying that's how it goes. The important thing here is that you have that moment of seeing at the path of seeing. Before that, you're on the path when you're having kind of you have good meditation, strong meditation, not yet full realization of the truth. That's the path of joining. When you don't really have the meditation and you're practicing that and you're kind of accumulating merit, that's the path of accumulation. That's kind of a general sense that sort of applies to everything. It's very general, and I'm sure that someone who's listening could find many holes in that argument, but that's, what the problem. So I think that's the main point of the without having read the question, I think that should answer the main question that the questioner had. Now, the questioner also had several questions to do with regression and rebirth. And so the question like, what allows one to be reborn human in the 2 higher realms and what forfeits these? So basically that's karma. If you have an extraordinary amount of virtuous actions, or one extraordinarily powerful virtuous action, that is probably enough to be reborn, or that could lead to rebirth in the human realm. And for the higher realms, you'd have to develop the dhyana meditations. And we'll talk about the process of those later, so I'm not going to go through them later. And what forfeits that is if you do unvirtuous actions, basically. If you go and if you carouse and kill and steal and all that, you're not going to do well the next time around. And it's similar when you're thinking about a precious human body where you can practice the Dharma. You even have to have more virtue than to just be born human. So, that all is good. That all is necessary. We have to actually practice this in order to achieve it. So then the next question is, if in the desire realm, if you have seen the clear light, yet regresses, this means you haven't really seen the clear light. You have had an experience. You haven't got realization. So you go from understanding to experience where you're seeing, and it's a real experience. It's not to be diminished, but it's not yet realization. Realization is not going to forfeit. Once you have realization of the truth, there is no falling back from that. So if you have an experience and then you kind of regress, that's just a sign you need to keep working. It's not a bad sign. It's a good sign. And then the last question was about what about Naga rebirth? What causes that rebirth? It's a difficult answer to say, certainly if you make the aspiration, I'd like to be reborn as a Naga, then there's certainly a cause of being reborn as a Naga. But that is, I don't know that many of us are making that aspiration to be reborn as Naga spirits these days. It's not recommended. So that takes care of the questions, and it also finishes the section on the paths. And now we've come to another section where I think that we've come to the section, the explanation of individuals. And before we do the explanation of individuals in the book, again, I think it's going to be important for you to have, or helpful for you to have, a general presentation of it, because especially if we're studying in the Tibetan tradition, we hear all about bodhisattvas and 10 levels of bodhisattvas, but we don't hear a lot about stream enterers, once returners, non-returners, and arhats. You might have read these terms once, but say, oh, I know what it is. That's a different matter. So I'm going to take a digression from the book to give a general presentation. And then once I've given the general presentation, I think I can go through the book pretty quickly. So here we have the general presentation of this. So to go back to this page here. So now to move on. So we have the 4 results of the spiritual way, or you can say the 4 types of individuals. Or you can say 4 types of results. When you are practicing the path of the foundation vehicle, there are 4 kind of stages that you go through. These are all on the paths of seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So they're all noble individuals. So these are 4 types of noble individuals, as opposed to ordinary individuals who have not yet seen the truths. So the 4 results are: the stream enterer is someone who has seen the 4 truths, but not yet freed themselves from the desire realm. I should have put that qualifier in there. Someone who has seen the 4 truths. So when you see the 4 noble truths, you are on or have gone through the 16 moments of clear realization. You are a stream enterer, basically. This gets more complicated than that, but we won't worry about that now. Then once returner is someone who will only take 1 more rebirth in desire. So this means someone who has seen the truths and has discarded some of the discards of meditation for the desire realm. And we'll get to the number. And because you've discarded some of them, you haven't discarded all of them. So you're going to have to take rebirth in desire 1 more time. But only 1 more time, because you're a noble individual, and because you're noble, since you're noble, you're definitely going to continue striving at the path. So in your next lifetime, you'll be able to free yourself from the desire realm, if not achieve the state of arhat. Then the 3rd level is the level of someone who will never return to desire realm. So this means someone who has seen the truths and eliminated all of the discards of meditation for the desire realm. Remember, in general, there are the 4 discards of meditation: desire, anger, pride, and delusion. These 4, and these are kind of deep-seated, more deeper than they're not based, they're based on looking at actual things, and so they're more deeply seated than the discards of seeing, which are a little bit more conceptual and inwardly focused. So these are more focused outwards. And we can divide them into kind of 9 sets for each level. So if you've gone through all of the 9 and eliminated all the 9 sets for the realm of desire, then you are a non-returner. And you're called a non-returner because you're not returning to desire, non-returning. Then the last is the state of an arhat, and this is someone who has extinguished all the defilements. Now, within arhats, there are different types that go from, a regular arhat, to use a to kind of this is not a technical term. There are regular arhats, there are Prateka Buddhas, and there are Buddhas. They're all considered arhats, different types of arhats, but that will become clear in a day or two. So those are the 4 different types of results. But we divide them into 2 phases each. So each result has 2 phases. There's entering and abiding in the result. So entering is like when you haven't quite got it, but you're working at it and you're almost there. That's the colloquial way of saying it. It's definitely not technical. You're almost there. Good enough that we can call you that, but not quite where you're on a stable level. And then the second is abiding in the result, and that's where you're really just there. So we've got a stream enterer. So that we have 2 pairs for each, so we have 4 pairs of results, which means there are 2 types of stream enterers. There are people who are entering stream enterer, and then stream enterers who are abiding in the result. So that's 2. Entering stream enterer, and stream entering. The entering stream enterer, this is one of those, it's in Tibetan, it's just as bad. You've got 2 shuk shuk. And in English, we have 2 entering stream enterer. So that's entering. This means someone who has who is in the moments of in the first 15 of the moments, right? And then when you get to the 16th moment, you're dwelling in the result, generally. Then you have a once returner. So that's a person who's only going to take one more birth and desire. So there's entering once returner, which means someone who's actually got the level of stream enterer, generally, if you're going through the results successively. You've discarded some of the meditations of desire, but not quite enough to be a once returner yet. But you're working at it. That's entering once returner. And then once you've eliminated at least 5 of the first 5 of the meditations discards, then you're dwelling in result. So then there's the next set is the non-returner. So the non-returner is someone who will never return to desire. So this means you are either entering, it says entering stream enter. I didn't edit my slide well enough. Entering non-returner. It should not entering stream enter. Entering non-returner and non-returner. So entering non-returner is someone who is working at eliminating the last afflictions that keep them back in desire. And then someone who has eliminated those is a non-returner. And then an arhat is someone who has extinguished all the defilements. So you've got entering arhat. So entering arhat is someone who is working at eliminating the last afflictions that tie you to the 3 realms of samsara, which means the afflictions of the level of the peak of existence. So that's for each pair. You've got the 4 types of stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arhat, and you've got 2 for each. Entering stream enterer and stream enterer, entering once returner, entering non-returner and non-returner, and entering arhat and then arhat itself. I'm going to fix that one little word. Sorry about this. Now we'll go back to sharing this in just. Okay. So here we have it with the fix. So you've got entering, non-returner, and non-returner. So now there's a question, well, how do you go through these stages? Well, we've been through the 16 moments of clear realization. Well, we've also got to deal with the discards of seeing. So for each level of the desire realm, or each level of, each of the 9 levels, we've got 9 sets of discards of meditation. So 9 sets of desire, delusion, pride, anger. And the anger is only in the desire realm. In the upper realms, the form and formless, the 8 levels of the form and formless, you only have desire, delusion, and pride. So you've got 9 sets of these. So I've got these 9 here, but actually they're not all the same, really, because actually they're different sizes. So you've got the bigger going down to the lesser, but you still got 9 sets. So when you look at these, actually we can divide them into 3. You've got 3 greater, 3 middling, and 3 lesser. Or you could say bigger, middle, and smaller, right? So those are the 9. You've got the 3 greater, 3 middling, and 3 lesser. But then for each of these, we can say, well, actually, even in the greater, there's a bigger and there's a smaller, right? There's a sequence. So to divide it all out, we call them the greater, greater, middling, greater, and lesser, greater. Those are the 3 greater, right? And then you've got the greater, middling, middling, and lesser middling. Those are the 3 middling, right? And then you've got the greater lesser, the middling lesser, and lesser lesser. In the greater, there's a bigger and there's a smaller, right? There's a sequence. So we've got the, hang on a second, someone is, okay. So we've got these 9 stages, and they're getting progressively smaller. So these words, greater, greater, middling, greater, less greater, when we're talking about them, it seems like it's kind of confusing at first, but you just get used to it. Remembering there are 9 stages, greater, and you've got greater, and they're divided into 3 main ones, greater, middling, and lesser. Each of these is divided into 3 more each. So greater, greater, middling, and lesser of greater, greater, middling, lesser of middling, and greater, middling, and lesser of lesser. So those are the 9 sets of discards of meditation. So what do you get? How do you eliminate them? Well, you have to have the antidotes, right? So the antidotes here are like, you've got the 9 sets of antidotes. So you've got your 9 discards, the greater down to the lesser. So first, you have the first antidote, which is kind of hard to see on the screen, right? That first antidote is kind of small. And then you have the second antidote, which is a little bit bigger. And then you have the third antidote, which is again slightly bigger than that. So the first is the lesser antidote, and the middle antidote, and the greater lesser, the lesser, the middle lesser, and the greater lesser antidotes. And then you have the fourth is even bigger, and then the fifth, and then the sixth, and each of them comes in and eliminates. You go through an order, and so you've eliminated them one after another with these 9 sets of antidotes. And these 9 sets of antidotes are, again, you've got the lesser, middling, lesser, greater, lesser, the lesser middling, the middling, and the greater middling. Then the lesser, middling, the lesser greater, the middling greater, and the greater greater. So you've got these 9 antidotes. So these are the 9 antidotes. So you've got 9 discards and 9 antidotes. And the way it works is that the way they correlate is that the antidotes go from small to big, and the discards go from big to small. So this is how they all correlate. You've got the lesser antidote eliminates the greater discards or afflictions. The middling lesser antidote eliminates the middling greater afflictions. Then the greater lesser eliminates the lesser greater, and so forth until you've got the greater that eliminates the lesser lesser. So this is how they all correlate. So this is showing the correlation. Of course, the antidotes and the discards cannot exist at the same time. This is the point. The discards are actually, even though they seem really strong, you feel a strong feeling of lust or anger or so forth. You may feel a strong feeling, but actually that discard itself, the afflictions themselves, are weak. The reason they are weak is because they're based on misunderstandings. The antidotes are actually strong. Even though they're hard for us to develop, they're actually stronger. And so in that way, you have the, once the antidote arises, it eliminates, that's why a smaller antidote can eliminate a greater affliction. But some of the afflictions are deeper seated, and those are what we call the lesser. But in general, we would say that actually the antidotes and the afflictions cannot coexist. They cannot be in the same person's being at the same time. The antidote and the corresponding discards just cannot stay together. So you've got these, this sequence. So that's how the 9 sequences of work. And this is the way it is for each of the realms. So in the desire realm, you've got 9. In the first level of form, you've got 9, and so forth. So in total, you have 81 sets of discards of meditation. So these are the 81, right? For the desire, you've got the 9 particular ones. For dhyana, you've got 9, right? For the second dhyana, you've got 9, and so forth. And then at the peak, you've got 9. So you've got a total of 9 levels and 9 sets for 81. So here, when you have gone through the 16 moments of clear realization, and you haven't yet eliminated any of the discards of meditation, then you are a stream enterer. And in particular, they're what they call a 7-timer. 7-timer means someone who is going to come back to the desire realm no more than 7 times. You could come back, you could actually make the whole path quicker. But the maximum, it's saying there's a maximum of 7 rebirths in desire. You might take more rebirths, you probably will take more rebirths than that in the form and formless realm, but no more than 7 in desire. So that's why it's called the 7-timer. So with that stream enter, then after that you become a once returner. When you're a once returner means someone who is actually striving to achieve, someone who has achieved stream enter, who's trying to achieve that. So they have eliminated the first set of discards of desire, which means the greater discards with the lesser antidote. And because of the nature of this, I couldn't do the scaling on this table, but you can understand. So if you've eliminated 1, or if you have eliminated 2, or 3, or up to 4, or is it up to 5? No, if it's up to 5, no, this up to 5, then you are entering once returner. You may still, so this means at this stage, you may have more than 1 rebirth. If you die before you discard that 6, you may have more than 1 rebirth in desire. But once you've got, and at this point, and this is also assuming if you are striving to enter the result, like if you're actually doing the meditation and trying to eliminate the discards so that you become a once returner, then you are entering once returner. If at this point, you're kind of taking it easy, you've achieved stream enter and you're happy to stay there for a little while before you do the meditation, then you're just dwelling in the result. Once you're actually actively trying to achieve once returner, then you're entering once returner. And then once you are at this stage, you've gotten through 5, you've eliminated 5 levels of discards. Then when you eliminate the 6th, then you're abiding in the result of once returner. That means that you have 3, a minimum or a maximum of 3 more discards of desire. And this could also, you could also be what we call someone with 1 lifetime, 1 obstacle, which means you have either 1 lifetime or 1 more obstacles. That would be either 7 or 8 discarded for meditation. So when you have only 3 or 2 or 1 sets of discards of meditation of desire realm left, then you're a once returner. If you have only 1 or 2 left, then you're called 1 lifetime, 1 obstacle, right? If this is the first time you've heard this and this is still kind of confusing, don't worry. It just takes multiple times. You got to hear it a few times. But when you think about it, it's actually not that difficult. And then what happens? Well, you eliminate that last discard of meditation and desire, and you become a non-returner. So this means that you will either in this lifetime, you'll keep going and achieve arhatship, or you will die and be born in the higher realms, but you're never coming back to the desire realm. And so that is called a non-returner. So once you achieve this state, then you're stably free of rebirth into the desire realm. You haven't freed yourself entirely from all the afflictions, so you are not completely free of samsara. But you're no longer in the desire realm, so that is non-returner. So that is the kind of general explanation of that, to kind of show you how it works in general, so that when we go through the text, which we will begin in just a moment, it'll hopefully be a little bit easier for you to understand. So now shall we move to the text? Where is it? Here we are. So the explanation of the individual is at the very bottom of this page, and in the book, this is on the top, or near the top of page 454. The explanation of individuals has 3 topics, explaining the 4 pairs of individuals. The 4 pairs of individuals are what? They are entering, stream enter, and stream enter, entering once returner and once returner, entering non-returner and non-returner, and entering arhat and arhat. So those are the 4 pairs. Then classifying into 7 enumerations and combining them into 6 substances. So explaining the 4 pairs of individuals, and this has 3 topics. The first is explaining stream enterers, the second is explaining those previously detached, and the third is explaining successive results. So here, when we're talking about the 4 different types of individuals, the way I described it just a moment ago is talking about what we call someone who goes through successive results. And this is the easiest way to understand it. The problem is, sometimes people have done worldly meditations and achieved levels of jhana before they enter the Buddhist path and before they go through the path of seeing. And so when they come in, they have eliminated some or all of the discards of seeing desire. And so they have, what do you call them then? So that's the issue. So the first one we are going to talk about is explaining the entering, stream enter. And this has 2 points. And the first point is kind of classifying the mind. So here it says, in verse 29, during these, sharp and dull faculties are followers of faith and dharma. So you've got these 2 terms, followers of faith and followers of dharma. Because here we're recognizing that not everyone who's achieving the path of seeing is exactly the same. There was the Buddha on the evening before he achieved enlightenment, the prior to achieving enlightenment during the eclipse. So before that, he achieved the path of seeing, right? During that time, he had sharp faculties. Someone like me, I haven't even got to this path of the path of seeing, and if I got there, I'd definitely be on the level of dull faculties. So we're recognizing that there are people with different levels of faculties. And a sharp and dull is not necessarily, I mean, of course, on a level it's good or bad, but actually dull faculties is pretty good when you're talking about already being a stream enter. It's excellent. So these are called by 2 terms, the followers of faith and the followers of dharma. So during the period when they're abiding in these 15 moments of the path of seeing, the 2 types of individuals, sharp and dull faculties, are called, if of dull faculties, followers of faith. Followers of faith mean that they are following teachings given by someone else. They feel faith in the teachings. They haven't quite got the prajna to see it all on their own, but they can follow the faith and they've got strong enough faith and enough prajna that they're able to go through the path of seeing. So that is a follower of faith. Or if of sharp faculties, followers of dharma. So these are people who, like the Buddha, are people who are really just following their prajna. So this is because those of dull faculties clearly realize the truth because of spiritual advice of other masters during their previous period as ordinary individuals. So this means that this is like most people. You have encountered a spiritual master who's teaching you, They're giving you instructions, you follow the instructions, and you achieve the path of seeing. That's following faith, they say. And whereas those of sharp faculties did not rely on other masters during their previous time as ordinary individuals. They realized the meaning of the scriptures on their own through prajna, or full knowing, and clearly realized the truth. So they're able to, they don't need to have a whole lot of teachings. They don't need to continually go and see masters and ask questions. They just understand from their sharp faculties. So the sharp faculties are actually very rare individuals in this level. So these two terms, the followers of faith and the followers of individuals, are actually terms that my own teacher, Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche, often uses with a slightly different meaning, but I think it's a good one to think about. When Rinpoche talks about these terms, he talks about them, what is it? He talks about them in terms of people, the followers of faith are those people who are kind of culturally Buddhist, who, you know, you grow up in a Buddhist environment. You don't know anything about it. You just kind of say, oh, yes, everyone goes through prostrations. We're going to prostrate. Everyone makes offerings. We make offerings. We do that kind of culturally. Now, these people often have extremely strong faith, especially like a lot of Tibetans have really, really strong faith in the Dharma, but they don't know a whole lot about it. So especially a lot of lay people in the old days, especially, it was like this, had very, very strong faith, but not a whole lot of knowledge. Then you have people who come in and it's like they don't necessarily have it. In particular, Rinpoche talks about Westerners as being like this, but I think this could be anyone who has had a modern education. And like, for example, we'd think of like, you know, people think of China and East Asian countries as being Buddhist countries, but these days, you know, people don't get Buddhist educations, and families in many places, the Buddhism has been discouraged, and people don't get much exposure to it until they go through later. You come to it and you hear about it and think, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And you use your intelligence to realize that there's something important here. So that's like a follower of, what is it called? The sharp faculties, the followers of following full knowing, following prajna. So these are the two types of people. And so this is an interesting thing to think about, the followers of faith and the followers of Dharma. Are we following this because, are we doing the Dharma because it's mainly a cultural thing, something that you do? You have a lot of faith, but you don't know a whole lot about it, or are you someone who's using your intelligence? So that's the way Trungpa Rinpoche describes it. Now, the way Rinpoche describes it doesn't completely match with what's in the scriptures, but that's okay, because it's also kind of an important thing for us to think about. And it's important for us to remember and kind of celebrate, you know, if we're like, you had absolutely nothing to do with Buddhism for the first, 30 years of your life, and then you encounter it and you get excited about it, and you're using your intelligence to follow it. That's good. That's excellent. So this is kind of a nice way of seeing it. And there's kind of advantages to both. When you come into it later, like as most of us Westerners, for example, and many Asian people as well, when you come into it later and you are using your intelligence, it gives you sort of a strength of being able to see it, as opposed to, followers of faith, if something breaks your faith, then that's difficult. Okay. So now, what in general we're speaking about are people who are on the path of seeing. You're on those 16 moments of clear realization. And so at that point, you're on the 16 moments of clear realization. So in general, most people who haven't already gone through, developed the jhana meditations are just stream enterers. They're entering stream enterers. So to describe this in the next topic, it says the distinctions in abandonment and realization. So here what we're talking about. Well, if you haven't discarded any of the discards of meditation of the desire realm by a worldly path before going through the path of seeing, then you're entering the first result. As it says, they're entering the first result if no discards of meditation or up to 5 have been destroyed. So, whether you're a follower of faith or a follower of Dharma, if you haven't previously developed any of the dhyana meditations or the preparations, and you haven't discarded any of the discards of meditation, then you are entering the first result. which is entering the result of stream enterer. In other words, this is saying that of the 4 pairs, you are entering stream enterer. So to read the commentary, those 2 individuals, the followers of faith and the followers of Dharma, are entering the first of all results to be attained and are called entering the result of stream enterer if no discards of meditation have been discarded previously by a worldly path and they possess all the bonds. All the bonds here means all of the discards of meditation that bind you to the desire realm, as well as the other two realms. Or if up to 5 discards of meditation have been destroyed by the worldly path, they're entering the first result, just as they were when they still possessed all the bonds. So, that individual, so this is someone who has done some meditation, some of the preparations for achieving dhyana. They haven't yet achieved the first dhyana, but they've done some, and they've gone through. They've eliminated either the first, second, or 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or up to 5 discards of meditation have been eliminated by their worldly paths. Then they see the truths. So when they're on those 16 moments of clear realization, then they are called entering once returner. Because when they are finished with that, that's the level that they will be on. And so just as they were when they still possessed all the bonds. In other words, it's exactly the same as if they hadn't, wait a minute, just as they were when they still possessed all the bonds. They're still entering the first, they're not entering once returner, they are entering the stream enter. Excuse me about that. The reason is that when they achieve the result, they will still achieve the, when they achieve the result, they will still be stream enterers. So they're, whether you've eliminated none or up to 5 of the meditative discards, then you are entering stream enterer. And so the phrase up to includes 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5 discards, or any of 1 to 5. Then the next one is explaining those previously detached. Attached means those people, detached means those people who have detached themselves from the desire realm, those who have no more attachment to the desire realm. So previously detached means someone who has achieved that detachment from the desire realm before they achieve the path of seeing. Okay? So this means someone who has already practiced yoga. I'm going to pick on yoga, but it could be whatever tradition practices the jhana meditation. Someone who has previously practiced yoga or jhana and freed themselves from the desire realm, who then comes to practice to enter this path of seeing. So how do they go? So this has 2 topics: enterers and abiders in result. So those who are entering and those abiding in result. So for the enterers, this has 2 points. The second till the 9th extinguished. So when you are on the path of clear, in the 16 moments of clear realization, if you have eliminated either the 6th, 7th, or 8th, then you are entering once returner. Because when you are finished with the path of the 16 moments of clear realization, you will be at that result of once returner, because you'll only have 1 more lifetime. So they are entering the second result of once returner if any of the discards, if any of the 6th, 7th, or 8th, or up to the 9th discard of meditation is extinguished. So this means a once returner. The 9th discard has not yet been discarded. So then one who is detached from desire or higher is entering the third. So one who's detached from desire or a higher level up to nothingness is entering the third result of non-returner. So someone who has achieved the first dhyana, or the second, or the third or fourth, or the formless meditations, who then enters the path of seeing, the 16 moments of clear realization, is entering the third result of non-returner. So that's the enterers. And then there are the people who are abiding in when are they abiding in the result? Well, this has 2 points. The actual is those who are entering a result abide in it on the 16th. So those, whether they're followers of faith or followers of Dharma, who are entering and a result that the result then abide in it, or that result, on the 16th moment. So moments 1 through 15, you're going through it, and then you get to the 16th moment, then you are abiding on that moment, or abiding in that result. So if you haven't eliminated any of the discards of meditation, then you are entering stream enterer. Or if you've discarded up to 5 of the discards of meditation, you are a stream enterer. When you get to that moment, you have eliminated 5, then you are once returner. If you have eliminated all of them for desire, then you are a non-returner. But you cannot just go straight through and immediately become an arhat. Arhatship is not attained at first. So on that 16th moment, you can't get to arhat on that moment, because the path of seeing does not abandon the discards of meditation. So you have to have some discards of meditation left, and you can't. The path of seeing does not discard of that, and because it is impossible to have previously detached oneself from the peak of existence by the worldly paths. In other words, you still at least, if you go through meditation and you get to the formless realm meditations, the 4th formless realm, the peak of existence, before entering the path of seeing, you can't go beyond that by a worldly path. You have to go through the path of seeing. But those discards of meditation that keep you tied to the path, to the peak of existence, cannot be overcome by the path of seeing. So therefore, you cannot achieve the level of arhatship just by going through the process of clear realization. In other words, what it's saying is that once you go through, that even after you've gone through the 16 moments of clear realization, you still have to meditate on the path. Now, if you're of great faculties like the Buddha, then you can do that all in one night. But most of us, it takes a while. At most 7 lives, according to the Great Exposition. So now these are the names they're called. We had the followers of faith and the followers of Dharma, right? So then after you've reached that, you're abiding in the result. At that point, you're called by a different name. Sharp and dull faculties are then convinced through faith and attained through seeing. So people who have sharp faculties, who were called followers of Dharma, are now called attained through seeing. And those of dull faculties, who were followers of faith, are now called convinced through faith. And so because those with sharp and those with dull faculties, those with dull faculties are then, at the time one abides on the 16th moment, called convinced through faith, and those with sharp faculties are called attained through seeing. And the reason is because they are respectively brought about by great faith and full knowing or prajna. So that is what do we say? I'm taking a look at the book. Where did I get to? Okay. So what do we have? We've gone through that. I'm trying to decide. I'd hope to go through the text much more quickly after giving the general presentation, but I think I went through the general presentation enough, or took enough time to go through that general presentation, that it's better to stop here at this point today, and then we can come back and discuss the successive results starting on our next session, which will be on Tuesday. So I think I see is that a question in chat? The question is, what does it mean? What does a worldly path mean? So worldly path here means, when we're talking about paths, we are speaking about paths, we're primarily speaking about the wisdom or meditations. And there are 2 types of these, as we discussed earlier. There's the worldly path, and there is the noble paths. So the worldly paths are the paths of non-Buddhists, essentially. So the path of practicing jhana. So these are able to eliminate the afflictions that attach you to a particular realm, but not forever. So someone who achieves the dhyana meditations through a non-Buddhist meditation, can then be reborn in the form realm, but when that's done, the afflictions for desire will be re-arise, and they'll be reborn in the desire realm. So the noble paths or the Buddhist paths are ones where they actually completely uproot the afflictions, because it's greater seeing, as opposed to just kind of squelching them with strong. So here's another way to say it. So the worldly paths squelch your afflictions just with the strength of shamatha meditation. It's just like your shamatha meditation is so strong that they have no chance to actually realize. The Buddhist or the noble meditations uproot the afflictions with prajna and insight. It actually pulls it out. So the worldly meditations are primarily shamatha. The noble meditations are primarily insight. That is the difference between the two. Okay. What is the difference between infinite space and infinite consciousness? The infinite space and infinite consciousness, infinite space is the first level of the formless realm, and infinite consciousness is the second level of the formless realm. They're called that because of the particular meditations that you go through in order to achieve those levels. So in general, infinite space is very subtle, and infinite consciousness is even more subtle. Infinite space, you achieve that level by thinking space is infinite, meditating on that. To achieve the level of infinite consciousness, you meditate consciousness is infinite. And so that's the difference between the two, the basic difference. These are discussed in much more detail later. They're discussed in the 8th chapter, so we will get to those in a few weeks. Okay. So I think that is enough for this morning. Tomorrow being Monday, we will take off, and then we will return on Tuesday. So please recite the dedications with great faith and devotion, and with the wish that all the benefit of teaching and listening to the Dharma may actually bring true and lasting benefit to ourselves and all other sentient beings. Osanam de tam je se bani tobne nye peranam pam chete Jegana chi balong chubai Sipe zole dro kunyo dro sho. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all beings swiftly from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Chancho, Sencho, Rincho, Rinpoche, Make, Panam, Gyurje, Gyeba, Nyamba, Mebariang, Gone, Gondu, Pelwar, Sho. May bodhicitta, great and precious, arise in those who have not roused it, never weakening in those who have. May it grow ever stronger and stronger. So, thank you.